May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your eyes, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Good morning. There were many options to choose from for the focus of my homily this morning. The Beatitudes, the celebration of All Saints' Day, the election, the continuous racial and political turmoil in our country, societal and religious discourse across the world, the natural disasters here and around the globe, and the seemingly out of control spread of COVID-19 with increasing infections and deaths almost everywhere. I wish it was a list with more uplifting choices, but there are a few. The Beatitudes, All Saints' Day, and to an extent, the election. So it is on these that I will share my thoughts, words, and encouragement with you this morning. Let's start with the Beatitudes, which are at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel. I like to think of them as the commandments of the New Testament. While the commandments of the Old Testament teach us what we should and should not do, the Beatitudes teach us how we should be. They show us the characteristics that portray the life of a Christian. In them, Jesus teaches us the virtues and values in life that will result in blessings. Let's take a look at some of them. To be humble in spirit. Now, I always had trouble understanding what Jesus meant by being poor in spirit until I came across Billy Graham's explanation. By simply changing the word poor to humble, the meaning becomes clear. Being self-satisfied or proud is not the way. Instead, we are to recognize, to be aware of our own spiritual emptiness and strive for a deeper relationship with God. To be meek, not to seek recognition, but to do what is right simply because it is right. Being meek, especially nowadays, is probably the least admired character quality in America. Yet the Bible celebrates meekness. The Bible's worldview says last is first, giving is receiving, dying is living, losing is finding, the least is the greatest, meekness is strength. To hunger and thirst for righteousness is to have the desire to lead a righteous life so strongly that we hunger and thirst for it. We need it to survive. In today's world, this can be a longing for social righteousness, for God to cleanse our society. Hunger for righteousness leads us to promote God's cause in business, education, politics, and voting. To be merciful, to forgive, to show mercy to others just as God shows mercy on us and forgives us over and over and over again. To be pure in heart. This one speaks to having pure, good, and wholesome thoughts. Thoughts of thankfulness and thoughts about how we can bless others. Being pure in heart requires us to have a solid, unwavering resistance in our hearts to any thoughts of selfishness, impurity, doubt, and anxiety that may come our way. These don't get any easier, do they? To be peacemakers. Notice that this isn't simply peacekeepers. It's about making peace where peace doesn't exist. Plenty of opportunities for us to live out this beatitude. Going over this list of how to live a Christian life, what it means to be a good Christian, seems daunting, doesn't it? Following Jesus is not easy. And just as we need to keep our baptismal covenant active in our lives, we need to do the same with the Beatitudes. Both provide direction on how we are to be in this world. Jesus' teachings in the Beatitudes and throughout the Sermon on the Mount challenge us to see the world in a new way. He is calling for a new way of viewing human relationships with words he used over 2,000 years ago. And Jesus is still pleading with us to look at our hearts and create newness within. He is inviting us to live in a true inward peace that leads to a desire to bring reconciliation to all that is broken, to seek out opportunities for mercy and compassion, to pursue justice and righteousness for all people, all so badly needed in our country and the world today. With this being All Saints' Day, we could easily spend some time examining the lives of the saints to see examples of those saintly souls who have gone before us and lived their lives according to the Beatitudes. Let's spend some time this afternoon or this week looking at the lives of saints like Teresa of Avila, St. Paul, Julian of Norwich, or one of our other favorite saints. Let's see what we can learn from them and make a determined effort to live our lives according to the Beatitudes as they did. You have probably heard that being political in the pulpit is to be avoided. However, I would like to point out that there is a distinction between gospel politics and partisan politics. Jesus was clearly political and did not shy away from speaking truth to power. It runs throughout the Gospels. Many of us have already voted in the general election. Many of us will be doing so over the next couple of days. As we discerned or are discerning which candidates to vote for, it is particularly helpful to keep the teachings of Christ in mind. You may have read the letter Bishop Gutierrez issued this past week on this very topic. You may find it at the bottom of the DIOPA website's homepage. And I would like to share portions of that letter with you now. On November 3, both as individuals and as a country, we will make fundamental decisions about our values and morals. As Christians, we do not have the luxury of separating the two. We are called to vote our faith, conscience, and hearts as they have been formed by Jesus Christ. We have the gift to live in this country and the freedom to express our values. However, we cannot forget that our faith must inform every decision we make, including voting. Through our democracy, we are choosing the compass point that will guide our moral journey into the future. As citizens and as Christians, we must express our constitutional right. The faithful and loving people of our diocese span the political spectrum. I am asking that when you vote, that you endorse not a party or a candidate, but your faith. Pray and discern how your vote will reflect the words, life, and heart of Jesus Christ. In order to do so, we must stop acting like the Gospels are simply a recommendation. They are the actual declaration of independence from the world's broken and selfish ways. As Christians, we have a monumental task to vote in a way that expresses the heart and love of Jesus Christ. Following Christ is not for those with a faint spirit. Our faith calls us to live and act based solely on the truth of the Gospels. As you discern and pray over your vote, compare the policies of the various candidates. Then ask yourself the following about each candidate. Which candidate will align with our baptismal covenant and value the dignity of every human being? Will lift up all people without distinction as to race, color, ethnicity, economic status, sexuality, or place of origin? Will promote peace? Will unite and not divide? Will not separate, demean, destroy, or tear down any of God's children? Will care for the poor, lost, hungry, lonely, and the suffering? Promote healing for all people? will value the sanctity of all life, will respect God's wondrous creation, will not promote or empower any individual or system that advocates racism, violence, hatred, or the division among the children of God, will sacrifice self for good of all people and society rather than individual wants and needs, and will build up systems of justice rather than tearing them down. The considerations on this list are all biblically based political statements, gospel politics. And in his letter, the bishop identifies their scriptural sources. Let us take time to read and digest them. For those of us who have already voted, hopefully these considerations reinforce our voting decisions. For those who have not yet voted, I pray they will provide guidance in your decision-making. So here we are, at what many believe is the most critical election in our country's history. In the remaining days leading to the election and the days that follow, let us keep in mind the lives of saints that have gone through other deeply challenging and stressful times in history. We can use their lives as examples to follow. We can use the Beatitudes, our baptismal covenant, and our faith as encouragement and sources of peace. Let us look to the leaders of all faith traditions who have been joining together to provide us with God-driven leadership in these difficult times. And may God's will lead us through. Amen. And John, can you now